Love Music, Hate Racism talk. We are an anti-racist organisation who recognises the importance of music. Music is a powerful force which can unify and bring people together. Music has fueled many revolutionary music throughout history. We have a really good panel here that will talk about Love Music, Hate Racism or Rock Against Racism in more detail. First up, I'm going to introduce you to Dave Randall, who Dave was from Faithless and Slovo. He is an avid supporter of Love Music, Hate Racism. David is a versatile and collaborative musician who supports a number of campaigns and has just authored a book which is soon to be released. The book is called Sound System, The Power of Political Music, and you can ask David more about that. So I'm going to pass you over to David. Okay, so we're just going to change the running order a little. Only because we have Roger here, who's going to talk about history of Rock Against Music. So Rock Against Racism and Love Music, Hate Racism. So I'll introduce Roger. Roger Huddle. He is founding member of Rock Against Racism. And Rock Against Racism is due to celebrate its 40th anniversary this year. It was founded as a response to an increase in racial conflict and the growth of the Nazi National Front. The campaign involved rock, pop, punk, reggae, and staged reggae musicians staging concerts with an anti-racist theme in order to discourage young people from embracing racism. This was in partnership with the UNL, which is the Anti-Nazi League. So I'm going to pass it over to Roger.
Okay. Oh, yeah. You have to give me a shout when there's time, because there's not nearly enough time to do this justice, so I'll be as quick as I can. But you can't talk about anything without putting it into historical context, so it has to be understood in terms of mid-1970s life. Almost everybody here wasn't around in the mid-1970s, but nevertheless, you have to take my word for it, it was bloody awful. Now, the slogan of art was reggae, soul, rock and roll, jazz, funk, punk, our music. And it was a deliberate slogan because it was uniting in the music what we wanted to do in the outer world in terms of unification of people fighting racism and, importantly in this period, the Nazis. Now, the struggle, it came 1976. 1976 was the year of rising racial tensions, lots and lots of attacks in Bradford, Glasgow, Leeds, London against Asian people, and it was also 1976 was the year that the police went for the Notting Hill Carnival, and there was this massive Notting Hill Carnival riots. So by the mid-70s, racism was on the agenda. It was on the agenda because of the disillusionment with the stinking Labour government that was cutting in the mid-1970s and tax on jobs, etc., etc. I can't go too far into that, unfortunately. But the National Front was feeding on the despair that people felt in this situation. And the National Front was doing incredibly well in local elections. Not as high as the BNP at its height, but certainly for the first time since the war, an open Nazi party was doing really well in terms of elections. Right in the middle of this, in August 1976, a man called Eric Clapton, who plays guitar, was on a tour, and off the Birmingham stage, he just went on with the most horrible racist diatribe, all night going on about what's this, what's that, what's... Enoch Powell was right, we've got to deport them, we've got to get rid of them all. And he was drunk on stage. The whole night was reflected really a certain element within inside the industry. The fact that they were just, the Clapton was just as much of a racist as he is today. Now, he made that statement, a man called Red Saunders was a photographer. Me and him have been working on a couple of projects. I was working for the Socialist Workers' Party in their print shop. He was a kind of agit-prop theatre person. He composed a letter that basically said to Eric Clapton, what are you going on about, man? You made all your money out of black music, you made all your money out of singing the blues, what are you doing being a racist? It basically said at the end, who shot the sheriff, Eric? It sure wasn't you. And the shooting the sheriff was a reference to Marley's great song, I shot the sheriff but I didn't kill no deputy, which is a great song, no one's heard it, you should check it out. And the thing was that Clapton, we wrote this letter, Red showed it to me, I signed it, 4 other people signed it, and Red sent it into the New Musical Express. The very last line said, we want to set up an organisation called Rock Against Racism that fights racism in music and a wider society. If you're interested, go send us a letter. Within 4 or 5 days we got up to 500 letters and a movement was born. Now the thing with Rock Against Racism, we was completely lucky. There was 2 very important developments at this time in music, because music in the early 70s was dire. Apart from some disco and funk, in England it was dire. It was the Bay City Rollers, it was by the Top of the Pops, which I think someone once said, say to Top of the Pops, it's like handing someone a warm turd. So that was the kind of the music that was playing and was dominating. 2 things happened. Because of the crisis, because of the rise in unemployment, because of the attacks on racism, 2 important things happened. Young black musicians in Birmingham, in London, in Handsworth, in Manchester, they began to form bands, and under the influence of what Marley was singing, began to do a Pacific English black music, which was looked for its lyrics at the problems they faced, not love and June and we're all going to skip down the mountain together holding hands. It started talking about what life was like to be a young black person in the inner urban areas. That was a very important development. The other very important development was punk. Now, I'm not a punk, I'm a soul man. I was a mod in the 1960s. My music is jazz, and I'm the jazz and funk person on that slogan. But what it was is that these 2 things were taking place at the same time, and we were political activists, we was culture people. I was a person who always fought in terms of getting a band on rather than playing discos at a social. I was a person at the social said, can we have the strip lighting off so we can get an atmosphere in there? Okay, so the point is that we began to do gigs, and we started to put together a whole number and a couple of things that were very important from the beginning. Because of punk and because of reggae, we found that we could, as political interventionists, intervene with inside that audience, with inside there to fight, to get a fight against the Nazis. So what we were doing, ours was just do gigs. We did a gig, I think the first one was 1977, or the first major gig was Christmas 1976, 77 at the Royal College of Art. We had Mutumbi and Limousine, which were a funk band. Mutumbi was a reggae band. And that was the first time that we asked both bands to gig on the stage at the end to show black and white unity at the end of the gig. And this was the pattern throughout the whole period of the VAR up until 1982. I've only got a minute left, so you're going to have to skip the last 5 years. And I'll just talk about a couple of things. 1977, middle of 1977, the NF decided that they would march through Lewisham in South London. Very, very black area. They did it on purpose. Adolf Hitler had a line on demonstration. He said, on a demonstration, you walk and you turn the worm into a mighty dragon. That was the fascist idea of taking the streets. That's why fascists are always going onto the streets, because on the streets, they feel their power, and the old idea, but we weren't going to let them turn into a dragon. We mobilised the SWP, anti-trade unionists, or anti-trade unionists who were anti-racist, people in the community in Brixton, and we went for them. And we hit them really, really hard, breaking the NF completely, attacked by the police. The important thing was, when we hit the NF, the thugs came from the back to defend the men in suits at the front. And that openly exposed the National Front as a Nazi organisation. I'm now going to have to finish. So what happened was that the A&L was formed after the attacks at Lewisham, and the big thing, and I'll end on this, in 1978, which was a turning point, we had what's known as a carnival in Victoria Park in East London. Now the line-up was really good. We had the Clash, Tom Robinson, Steel Pulse, Patrick Fitzgerald, Polly Simon, we should be so lucky. Polly Simon, and I was in charge of the backstage area that day. At 12 o'clock, I introduced Polly Stein. There was no one in the park. There was a couple of dogs, a bloke on a bike, and a couple of little kids fighting in the grass. By the time that she finished "Oh Bondage Up Yours," the demonstration that started at Trafalgar Square had arrived, 88,000. And the 88,000 had marched from Trafalgar Square to Vicky Park. Anybody who comes from London knows how far that is. They did the whole march. There was bands on the back of trucks. We got to the park, and that was the day. By the time that Tom Robinson sung "Glad to Be Gay" at the end, and Tom Robinson was on stage with Steel Pulse for the finale, those 88,000 have become the core of the struggle against the Nazis for the next 4 years. The rest of it is all very interesting, but I ain't got time.
Now I'm going to pass you over to Lola
Olafisoye.
Yes. We have a gig coming up on the 29th of October, and Lola is from Spektrum, and she will be performing. So I'm just going to ask Lola to just tell us a bit about music and how it's
Affected.
How it's affected you. Why it's so important.
Hello everyone. So it's quite interesting listening to Roger, because I'm a baby from '68, so I was only little growing up. I love the Basic Rollers, me. Yeah. And I love Jackson 5. And I'm Nigerian, and for me, growing up in the '80s with all the two-tone, Bob Marley, Fella, they moved me so much, and I loved Blondie. I love the music from that era. The music now, obviously, for me, is not the same, but it was always about the struggle, about the uniting, and I wanted to do that as an artist, and that was my dream, to write about that stuff. And obviously, I've got Fellow in my bloodline, in my ancestry, so it was always a political thing to actually break down the barriers, unite the forces until the four races come together and sit by the fire. We will never have a peaceful world. So that was my drive, my dream. And I was lucky enough to do performing artists, to do my degree in drama, and understand about how artists are the ones that are going to get culled first, because we are the ones that have the imagination, right, to break through the stereotypes, to understand there is another way, right? And so we as an artist have to give that message to the young people, not the messages of just wanton sex or wanton unnecessariness. We need to be able to bring these ideas of revolution through. And we're only going to do that is through uniting, two-tones, specials, the beats, selector, polystyrene, I can't remember the band that she was with, but X-Ray Specs, Grace Jones. All of these people were fundamental in my upbringing and in who I am as a person. And they made me feel fearless. No one will dare ever be racist to me. I will kill you that day. Because I know the history. You must know your history of the world, of the place that you were born in. So then that gives you the strength to know that what the governments are saying to you. Government means to govern your mind. Don't let anyone govern your mind. Always be open, willing to break down barriers. Don't be afraid. Be the artist, follow the dream. There doesn't have to be this war. We have enough troubles within ourselves than that to spill it out to everybody else. So for me, music has done that. You know, I have fella in my bloodline, so that's my passion, and I hope you come to see my gig on the 29th with these guys, because, you know, I do write about opening up your hearts and your minds, unifying, break down the barriers. Because what's it they say? United we stand, divided we fall. So, amen right to that.
Yeah, so I'm going to pass you over to Tim.
Thanks, Latoya. That was, you know, what a privilege to share a platform with these two. I was keen. Should I stand over? I'll stand over here just so I can, in case I need to read something in a minute. I was keen that Roger spoke first because I had a feeling that what I had to say might lead on from what, you know, from the scene he set, and actually it leads on in a very specific way, because I happened to have been doing a gig last night. I've only just arrived at conference today because it was all the way up in Skegness, so my apologies for missing out on the discussions that have taken place so far. That's how glamorous my life is. Butlins in Skegness. I was playing guitar with Tom Robinson, and he remains absolutely politically on point, and he sends his greetings and his solidarity to this meeting today. As you know, I haven't got long, so what I want to do is I want to look back at Rock Against Racism and some of what Lola said, and identify. I'm going to keep it to 6 bullet points. I want to talk about 3 things that I think that we should recreate from Rock Against Racism, emulate, and 3 things that we need to perhaps do differently or evolve. I think that the first thing that we really need to emulate is that fantastic spirit of creativity. And Lola spoke about the importance of imagination, this kind of sense of ambition, which was really running through from what, I mean, I was too young to remember Rock Against Racism for myself, but I've read quite a lot about it, and this jumped out at me. This is something that David Widgery wrote, who was another of the founding members of Rock Against Racism. This is what he said about Roger here and Red Saunders, who Roger mentioned, and then the rest of the team that made up the early days of Rock Against Racism. He says, besides being long-standing socialists of the revolutionary persuasion, they were both ex-mods who were crazy and knowledgeable about black music, and so communicated anti-racism in a passionate and positive idiom. They were quietly joined by other designers, famine writers, street fighters, nail biters, and miscellaneous socialists and feminist misfits who formed a genuinely collective ideas whirlpool. I think that sounds brilliant, and I think that that's the sort of a vision that we have to have. This shouldn't be narrow and bureaucratic, this should be open and full of creative ideas and ambition. That's the first thing we need to emulate. The second is the emphasis on grassroots activity, because people often talk about the big carnivals. Roger referred to the biggest in 1978 in Victoria Park. But actually, I think what was really brilliant about Rock Against Racism is that it encouraged people to put on small gigs in their communities up and down the country. And I think that we should emulate that as well. I think that activists today should create a hub so that we send out resources to people to help put on gigs up and down the country. You know, JPEGs for projectors, stickers, literature, all these sorts of things. And I think the website, the NMHR website, needs to be a good hub for precisely those sorts of things. The third thing that we need to emulate is this linking of oppressions. Roger mentioned that Tom Robinson sang Glad to be Gay at that carnival. We did a version of it last night in front of 1,500 ageing punks. And it still feels really powerful, actually. It's a real honour to perform that song with Tom Robinson, even now. Back then, you could be locked up for, if you're a man and you kiss another man in public, you could be locked up for gross indecency back then. But it still feels powerful. And there was one person in the audience in 78, a young Billy Bragg, and he's, you know, why is this guy banging on about being gay? This is about anti-racism. Then it occurred to Billy Bragg that actually, if you're against one form of oppression, you need to be against all forms of oppression, because that's the only way we're going to get unity and create a movement fit for purpose to change the world, make the world a better place. And I think that we need to think about that very clearly. And actually, you know, this is something that people are beginning to do. Some of us went to the Afro-Punk Festival the other day. Afro-Punk promote new black music on both sides of the Atlantic, and you had artists like Lady Leisha and Young Fathers and Grace Jones performing under a great big banner which says no sexism, no racism, no homophobia, no transphobia, and so on and so on. So I think that's another thing that we have to think about. And if there are artists with misogynistic lyrics, we need to challenge them. And if they're not up for having that conversation and they're not up for changing their ways, then we should invite them to be on LMHR platforms. So that's another thing that I think we need to emulate. Okay, 3 things that I think we need to do a bit differently. The nature of hate crime has changed a bit, hasn't it? It's not enough anymore to say black and white unite. I mean, that's still important, but actually a lot of the victims of hate crime might be Polish, they might be Lithuanian, they might be, just about anyone who isn't British in Britain today might be a victim of these sorts of hate crimes. And therefore we need to think about that when we're programming events. Let's not just get a young grime artist and an indie band on the bill. Let's see if we can get a Polish rapper collaborating with the grime artist. Let's see if we can get a DJ who plays music from all over the world. Let's see if we can get a fado singer from Portugal to sit in with the indie band. You get the picture. Let's think more broadly than Rock Against Racism were at the time. They made the right call back then, but we need to have a slightly different emphasis now. The next thing that I think we need to think about differently is that nowadays, thank goodness, it's only hardened racists who would admit to being racist. Most people say that they're anti-racist, and for our campaign to be politically relevant, I think we need to start the conversation, as we are with the posters and so on and so forth, by saying stand up to racism, this is about love music, hate racism. But then when you've got time with a particular artist, or if you are an artist, then I think, you should go a bit further. We should encourage artists to go a bit further and say refugees are welcome here. To be specific, that I'm against racism, and that includes Islamophobia. That Islamophobia is being stoked up in an outrageous way in order to distract us from our real enemy, which is this awful Tory government, and so on, you know what I mean? So I think that we have to begin with a broad anti-racist statement, but then whenever possible, be a bit more specific. The final thing that I think we need to, it's kind of obvious that we need to think about this differently from how Rock Against Racism did. We need to be social media savvy. I think that activists, Rock Against Racism were fantastic in terms of their branding, by the way. They had the best designers and so on and so forth. That's something we need to emulate. But we need to be good with social media. I think that activists need to be spending a good chunk of their time reaching out to people, via Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all these things. And as I say, the website needs to be a really well put together hub for activists, because of course that's where people get a lot of their information these days, particularly young people. So you know what I mean? This mustn't become a nostalgic replication of something that worked then. We need to bring it up to date. So those were 6 bullet points. I'll just run through them again. We need to emulate the creativity and sense of ambition. We need to emulate the emphasis on grassroots, bottom-up activity. We need to emulate this linking of different forms of oppression. We need to be a bit broader than the Black and White Unite slogan. We need to be a bit more specific whenever possible than just we're anti-racist. We need to be a bit more specific than that whenever possible, go a bit further politically than that, or a bit deeper if you like. And finally, we need to be social media savvy. Thanks for listening.
Now, so I'm just going to open the floor so people can contribute. We're all friends here, so don't feel shy. I'm just going to limit your comments to around a couple of minutes, but we'll let you know if you're running over.
Hello. My name is Roy Hobson, also known as Vesper. I'm from Deptford, and Rock Against Racism was important to us because we had the Albany Empire in Deptford, which was burnt down by the National Front. So the New Albany, which is a theatre, is a magical centre, which is sort of like a phoenix that grew out of the ashes of the National Front. Also, the National Front, I went to Addington Grammar School in Deptford. People are talking a lot about grammar schools now. Well, our old boys decided to let the NF use the football club for their meetings, and the legal case is in my bag here now. So, unity in the community.
I would like to talk about, further back in fact than Rock Against Racism, when Chuck Berry recorded Brown Eyed Handsome Man, and then later Van Morrison recorded Brown Eyed Girl. And what gets a lot overlooked was Joan Armatrading, Drop the Pilot, a black woman dealing with her sexuality, and also migrational meaning in music. And when we were on about Bob Marley earlier, I Shot the Sheriff, or I Didn't Shoot the Deputy, was used in the miners' strike, so I just thought I'd come up with, the equations between how music's evolved, right from rock and roll, which were mixed country music, gospel music, and that's why in America they put a ban on people like Elvis, because they were a white guy like playing black music basically, because rock and roll really didn't exist. It were, and before it were blues, it were called race music, and that's when you got juke joints in plantations, and that's where you get the jukebox from Leonard Chess, because they were putting money in, and they founded Chess Records. And the first, obviously, white band to come over to record with Leonard Chess was the Rolling Stones. And for somebody like Clapton, clearly, to make a comment like that in '76, when his career, and he brought Hendrix over, remember, you know what I mean, Afro-American, part Cherokee, you know what I mean? It's, and that's absolutely vile, you know what I mean, that he's made his living out of playing black music. I remember when Elvis made his comeback in '69 and he played Las Vegas, he had Sweet Inspirations backing him. He would not play any venue at all if Sweet Inspirations didn't share the hotel with him. And when he sang Suspicious Minds and he addressed the Sweet Inspirations and he caused all that row in Vegas and all the rest of it, bear in mind Sammy Davis Jr. when he played with the Rat Pack was sleeping in a trailer. I'm not going to sing any of them songs.
I was living in Camden Town when Ra started, and people shouldn't underestimate how important that first letter that went in, and then the temporary hoarding that came out, the magazines and the flyers. Because I remember we used to go down to the Roundhouse, and at the time the punks used a lot of Nazi iconography, Susan and the Banshees and whatever, and we used to go and pick fights. We'd go and pick fights with punks with swastika armbands. We didn't have anything to give them positively, and that's what Rock Against Racism was. It was a positive message, but it was a massive fight. It was a massive fight for what punk was going to become. So that's one point we should never underestimate. And there was an exhibition. It's quite a good exhibition at the British Library about punk, but it kind of really underplayed that fight. And that, and that's down to individuals. And that's the next point I want to really bring up is Ra, and then LMHR, which is, I'm a little bit older for that. Enabled activism. That was the thing. It enabled activism, but it was all about activism. It was all about what you did locally. Just like Wayman finished that session there, going, "You're the leadership. The people in this hall are the leadership, right? We are the leadership." Music is a very, very important part of that.
Fair enough. No,
right. Okay. Music's a very, very important part of that, and you can't magic creativity out. Some people have got it, some people are organised, right? But the two together can really make a change. And then you need the political situation in the outside world. And it does smell like the early and mid-70s to me. And we've been there before and we can do it again.
Yeah.
I'm going to give the microphone back to the panel because maybe some of the panellists would like to come back on the questions and then we can open the floor back up for any questions. If you'd like to... Should we take a couple more?
No, a couple more.
It's not really been any questions. Yeah.
Someone ask a question and then take the answer.
Speaking of high voices,
Just really want to sort of like back up what you guys are saying. I was privileged enough to be the musical organiser for Rotherham Carnival, which happened a couple of weekends ago, and we've had anti-Nazi, anti-fascist demonstrations that have been superb in Rotherham over the last few years, and what we saw by making Carnival is that the few hundred people turned into a few thousand people, and just by the power of the arts, the power of music, what a huge difference that makes. And now we've got the beginning of a huge movement in Rotherham that's really going to stand up to oppression. And I just wanted to just sort of back you guys up with the point that art makes a huge difference to our struggle against oppression.
Hi, I'm Randall from Unity magazine. Now, hopefully people have been given a copy of this, which has an interview with Red Saunders, the other one, apart from Roger, who was there at the beginning on these things. And I think it's fascinating, just in terms of a lot of the stuff he says about the actual process of setting things up, because that real thing about needing stuff from below and all that, I think seems to be really good. And also they're using social media, because what Red says about temporary hoarding and stuff was designed so it could be used like a poster. The badges that they went out and the leaflets were all about doing things locally, getting things sorted out locally. But he also talks about how vital it was to have that movement. But he also talks about how it related to the other political stuff that was going on, and the launch of the Anti-Nazi League, because he says it seems odd to him now that sometimes people say as if these were completely separate and unrelated things. But when you were having the big carnivals, you needed someone who was actually going to be providing the money for the PA, or the money for doing a big postering campaign, and that came from a lot of the trade unions, and the people who were active around things like the Anti-Nazi League could then go and leaflet the town centre or leaflet the local workplaces, and that way you went on building, both through the music and through what was going on in the wider fight against racism. So I think one of the things that we can still learn from what they were doing then is about that. You need that kind of interaction going on, and I think that's something that's still really exciting. And but absolutely agree with Dave that you will need to do a lot of stuff on social media and using modern things rather than trying to look or feel like what they were doing then. What we need to do is look and feel like what young people are arguing about today, and which is why you need young people doing it, because I don't know.
Next one. Does anyone have any questions for the panel? Okay, just behind you there.
I am Tony Barnsley, and before anyone says anything, I do know about Billy Bragg, so there's no need to remind me. 2 years ago in Dudley, we organised a Love Music Hate Racism Day Festival. And there's two things I want to say. It follows on from the point that Ken's just made. We approached local trade unions and we raised 13 grand to put on the event. So the first thing that everyone should do if you're going to go back home and organise your own events, approach your local trade union branches, you will find them friendly. The second thing that I think is worth noting, that in terms of the number of local young artists, I ended up having to turn people away because there's lots of young artists struggling to find gigs. So that is never a problem to actually do. My question is this back to Roger really, because I can see he's not paying attention. Because I've just been reading your, some of the comments that's in this new book called Walls Tumbling Down. And the kind of premise of that is that music has not got the kind of cultural resonance in society that it once did. Do you think that rebuilding a vibrant anti-racist music scene can actually have the resonance that it once did in the 1970s?
It's interesting because I think that's a slight misquote. I don't think the resonance is there. The important thing is that there was something happening that was new, that hadn't happened before. By and large, black bands didn't play with white bands, there wasn't that kind of inter-reaction with inside the communities. We took a long time to realise that people wouldn't go from Hackney to Walthamstow because they didn't know what the police were like in Walthamstow, so they didn't like changing boroughs. So there was a whole paranoia that existed, and I think there's political music now that is far, far more exciting, interesting and vibrant than it was then, but it's underground. By and large, it's underground. So therefore, so the idea you can't build a movement with the music like we could because it was new and it was virgin ground and we was political activators. Now you can do stuff. I mean, I'll come back at the end about the creativity thing. But now there's music out there that can be the could be the catalyst or the uniter or the channel that stuff is pushed out through, but you're not going to build a movement on the music alone. That's not going to be possible at the time. But it's not true that there's fantastic music out there, and you have to find the people who are making it, or make it yourself. I want to say one very quick thing about social media. When the Carnival was on, we got back to the office the next week. An American said, "Hi, I heard on your, on the papers and from friends in England that you had a carnival. Can you send us the film because we've got a film show coming up?" We went, "What film? We didn't take a bloody photograph, let alone a film." And so there was no mobile phones, no computers. All Tempe hoarding was hand cut and pasted. It was fairly primitive. I tell you, we could do that with a bloody scalpel and a felt top pen. God knows what you could do with social media.
We'll take a couple more questions. Also contributions, that's fine.
It's interesting people talking about the National Front because the National Front hasn't entirely gone away. Unfortunately, in Swansea, South Wales, for the last 3 years, over three times in the last 4 years, the National Front has attempted to have a worldwide Pride Day. So they've not entirely gone away and they've not changed. 3 years ago, in a post-gig, they dressed up as the Ku Klux Klan and they lynched a life-size gollywog, in a post-music thing in the South Wales valleys. Obviously, we've always opposed their attempts to have public rallies in the last 3 years, but last year we did things a bit differently. In the run-up to that, to them having a so-called worldwide Pride Day, which they had in the centre of Swansea, without the council stopping them. What we did, we had a Love Music, Hate Racism gig. We had 2 Love Music, Hate Racism gigs. We had a Poetry Against the Racists gig. We had a film night against the racists. We had a public meeting against the racists and the Nazis. And on the day, we got the council stage, which they allowed us to use and still haven't charged us for yet, even though it cost £4,000, but we've still not got the bill from last year. We then had, speakers, musicians, bands, and we got, for the main Love Music, Hate Racism gig, we got about 4 or 5 local bands from Swansea, which, obviously, performed for free, and it broadened the whole thing out. It got us a tremendous amount of publicity. We got the trade unions back in it, we got the LGBT Centre back in the protest on the day, Labour Party Awards backed it, Momentum backed it, as I say, different trade unions backed it, the mosque backed it. So we had by putting on these gigs, it's still a live issue. It's not a historical issue. It's still a live thing that broadens out the anti-racist message, because it's not about, at the end of the day, about the National Front who are pathetic. They are, a pathetic shell of their former selves, but they would like to be how they used to be. And a lot of them, they used to be in the BNP. Then they're in the Welsh Defence League, and they're just, which we smashed. No one's heard of the Welsh Defence League because we smashed it fairly quickly in South Wales. And on the day when they attempted to have a rally in the centre of Swansea, very heavily protected by the police, there was 10 or 15 of them, and there was over 500 of us with a stage in the square. Everyone abandoned the stage in the square as soon as it turned up, and went to confront the NF. And I think there's 2 things about that. First, as I said earlier, it's not just about the pathetic small numbers of the NF. You know, I mean, if they were so pathetic on the day, you kind of think, well, you know, are they worth it? But then a day after that, you know, I saw on the news, fascists in Belgium, you know, physically attacked, you know, a pro-refugee demonstration. And I thought, well, this is what the NF would like to do. They'd still like to do it. They haven't changed. The ingredients are there for the far right to grow. The other point about it, the main point about it, I think, is it was very, very good at broadening an anti-racist movement out to a new audience, setting an atmosphere and a climate of anti-racism and raising the anti-racist voices, you know, in the local media, in the streets, amongst young people, in the colleges, you know, and broadening out the message that way. It was an anti-Nazi gig, but it created a wider anti-racist climate.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, I'm just going to... Great.
Thank you. One more at the back?
Yeah.
Tim from Norwich. Just wanted to talk about, I think we have to, when we're going forward, I can't really talk about the 70s, I wasn't born. I remember watching some of the stuff my mum used to watch. She went to a gig in Cambridge, Love Music Racism gig back in the day, so that was excellent. But going forward, I think we do have a challenge because it's not, I think we do need to make Love Music Hate Racism part of the fight back against the kind of racism we're seeing at the moment, but also music. Like, some of the things today are good. Like, you have bands where black and white people sing, there's bands are much better, there are music scenes, but they haven't broken into the mainstream. The mainstream is awful, and the places that a lot of working class people go as well are awful. Like in Norwich, we have an excellent music scene, but the mainstream, where I work in insurance, which most people do. Most young people where I work in my company, they go down this street called Prince of Wales Road, which is awful, with the police batter you quite a lot. They attack kids. They attack black people quite a lot as well. The music down Prince of Wales Road is awful. So I think in terms of going forward, in terms of music, I think we do have to fight to make political music mainstream and bring it back again, put it back, because I hate seeing the kind of music that's mainstream at the moment. It's so awful, and it doesn't. And lastly, the thing about the Brexit, whatever way you voted, when we talk about people being left behind, I thought the speaker said about actually having Polish artists. I think in Norwich we want to go to places like Yarmouth and like Clapton, have a Polish band, have a Portuguese band, have poetry, have that kind of stuff. Actually take it on head on, and actually say that the lack of housing, the lack of jobs, that has to be part of the music. Because I sometimes feel like the last 8 years of austerity, like some of the music just doesn't reflect my life and other people's lives, like having your wages cut and everything, and all the kind of crap that the Tories have thrown up. So I think that has to be also part of music going forward. And there are the artists, there are loads of artists, but the music industry and the way that spaces, the culture are controlled. Like back in the day, my mum used to rave, I'll just finish off with this, but raves today, the police will be on you like a shot almost immediately. They'll smash you up and force you off. There's no spaces. They just want to make money out of music. They don't care about the music itself. It's not cultural for them. So we have to, I know that's not our primary goal. Our primary goal is to stop the racists, but if we can make music more cultural again, I don't mean, like, there are lots of good musical bands, but we can break through to the mainstream again. I think that'd be really important. But that's probably a longer term goal. So thanks.
Thank you. Did you want to say something? Yeah. Well, just so this lady here.
There's one at the back as well.
I was literally just going to say,
yeah.
Well, mainstream music is basically capitalist music, really. I mean, from 60s, 70s, before that, you know, people collaborating, black, white, different musical fusions. Coming out of that, it was honed in straight away. So, you know, the industry takes it, and people, artists, great people, starting off with the best of intentions, then get, you know, dissolved into signing a record contract, things like that. It's also the way in which you put your music out there, and the audience, and of course in workplaces, and the music we listen to is going to be programmed to, you know, make you not think, because that's exactly what they want you to do. And also, you know, aim it at children when there's blatant messages of misogyny in it, and, you know, just just hate really in it, like divide, but that's what mainstream music is really. I think it's like McDonald's music anyway. So.
Okay, I'm going to end it there, and sorry I can't get to the last guy at the back, I can just see his hand picking up. I'm just going to bring it back to the panel if you want to add anything.
Yeah, as an artist, it's been really difficult, like, to find a platform to release the music. You can't get gigs anymore because you've got to go through the whole system of a booking agent, or this, or you can't just gig anymore. Okay, play your gig. So it's really difficult if you have intelligence to say that it is very controlled, the music system. They do not want artists to reveal anything to the young, to anyone. So it's like, in a way, we do need a platform where we can have political, vibrant, diverse music, but, you know, I don't know where that's going to be. Maybe we need to start that up now so that we can help, otherwise it's just going to go downhill, because the mainstream music is abysmal, you know, and you have to be a zombie to appreciate that kind of style of music. So I think we should do that.
Just a couple of things that came out of the discussion I thought was really good. See, the thing is that any musician, no matter what they are, I mean, if they're going to do it, they want to do it and make a living. So therefore you're talking about working people, really. I mean, the whole idea that artists don't do anything for money or whatever is not wrong, it's not on. So you have to separate that off from the industry. Because in a lot of areas there's fantastic lively music scenes. There's a really amazing one where I live in East London. Lots of live bands playing, lots of music, lots of people put stuff on. They're not making records though. I mean, that's another problem. But that goes back to something so different. If you're going to do a gig, like Music Hate Racism gig, and you're going to have at least supply a backline, in other words a PA, at least tell the band, we're not going to be able to give you much money, we'll cover your expenses, etc. And show respect for the fact that they're working artists and they should, their labour should be paid for. I think that's very, very important. That's certainly the way that VAR always operated. The other thing is that Trotsky said a wonderful thing at the beginning of his great book on literature and revolution. He says that art is for the evening. It's like it comes out in the art. He said when the Red Army is cleaning its boots and getting over the day's fighting, that is the time that it reflects and culture comes in. And the other thing the more I think about it in terms of art, in the end, by 78, 79, the ANL was for the daytime, and the street fights and the pickets, and the evening was for the music and for the cultural expression of it. And at the cultural expression, you brought together the people who fought during the day, and that's the way that you build, or we think you build a movement. And so I think the linking with political movements is absolutely vital if you're going to fight. Collectively and properly. And I'm a little bit nervous about becoming to police the cultural world. We shouldn't see it as we're the policemen of the cultural world. If you say this, then you're not going to play. You have one line and one line only: no racism, no sexism, no homophobia, no Islamophobia. But everything else you have to work with. I think you can't become policemen. The other thing about history, the weird thing about WAR, is that I'm bringing a book out, we read in December, called Reminiscences of WAR. And I've got 59 people who've written their reminiscences, from Jerry Dammers, who came from the Specials, through to the person in, I think, Lowestoft, who run the little WAR group there. So it's a kind of, it's worth reading that, because from reading those experiences, then you'll learn from that about what to do today. I'm sorry I'm going to go on a bit. I must finish, but I've got to find where I wrote it down on a bit of paper. I can't find it, so I will have to. Yeah, it's quite good. It was a good point, right? Yeah, that's good. If I find it, I'll give Dave a nudge.
I've got to say, it really is an honour to share a platform with Easter. I mean, I agree 100% with Roger. I mean, there's lots of great political music out there. It frustrates me no end when you read, you know, columnists in The Guardian saying, where's all the protest music gone? As if the only legitimate protest music sounds like The Clash. You know, things have changed, of course they have, but there's loads of good stuff out there. Most of it is indeed, you know, fairly underground, but I do want to slightly respectfully disagree with this idea that the whole of the mainstream is rubbish. I think that's I think that's sort of missing some important nuances at least. Let me give the example of Beyonce and Formation. Now, I know a lot of people are very sceptical about her motives, that, you know, she was just trying to cash in and, you know, beat Rihanna and Lady Gaga, whoever, in the charts and so on and so forth. And that may well be true, but I think you're missing the point if you focus on her motivation. I think what's interesting is that we've arrived at a moment this year, in April I think it was, we've arrived at a moment where one of the world's most savvy business people and her team have decided that it is expedient to reference the Black Lives Matter movement and all the other things, Hurricane Katrina and Malcolm X and so on and so forth. And I think that shows how fantastic that movement has been, how powerful that movement has been. And when somebody as huge as Beyonce references those things, that opens up a space in the mainstream media. Momentarily, it opens it up for a debate. We need to jump on those opportunities. We need to be setting up meetings in our localities to kind of talk about, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement on the back of Beyonce at the Super Bowl. Just to give one example. So I wouldn't completely condemn all mainstream music. I think in a way it reflects what's going on in society as a whole. This brings me to the influence of the internet. I think that the internet is very positive in lots of ways. It allows artists for the first time, really, well, not for the first time, but in a much easier way than before. It allows us to bypass the gatekeepers of the mainstream music industry. And this was very important, for example, in the short-lived and ultimately tragic, but nonetheless fascinating and important Arab Spring. The way that the musicians in Tunisia and in Egypt, and the story was different in Libya and Syria, but the way that these musicians would communicate with an audience was initially through the internet, through Facebook, and one of the most important early catalysts of the Tunisian revolution, before Mohamed Bouazizi had set fire to himself. Before that, it was a hip-hop tune recorded by a 21-year-old who calls himself El General. That got circulated on social media. He wasn't signed. Likewise, Rami Hassan in Egypt became a big star via social media. He wasn't signed. And so this is exciting. We can bypass the mainstream music industry in a way that we never could before. That's the perspective from the artist. There's also an important thing from the perspective of fans. Fans can now communicate with each other and with artists via Facebook pages and so on, and Twitter. And that can be valuable too in certain campaigning situations. I'm going to give you one example. I personally, I don't want to open up a whole new discussion, we're about to finish, but this is just to give an example. I personally am a supporter of boycott, divestment and sanctions of Israel in solidarity with the Palestinians. That's what Palestinian civil society has asked for. And you can talk to artists about that question via social media as a fan, and there's been some fantastically important debates taking place in that way. I remember a long-running debate that took place in that way on social media with Macy Gray. In the end, she was persuaded to go. I think that was a mistake. But you know, so social media can be a useful campaigning tool. I wouldn't overstate it. I certainly don't think it should replace gigs, meetings, get-togethers like this. Far from it. But we shouldn't overlook the potential inherent in social media, both for artists but also for fans and political activists. And I completely concur. As a musician, you won't be surprised to hear me say that, but I completely agree with Roger that we should get paid But
I remember 1979 we had smashed the NF. They might be round in bits and pieces, but we smashed them. And we smashed the BMP, and we smashed the EDL in Walthamstow, and 2 days ago it was the 80th anniversary of when they smashed the Nazis in Cable Street. Welcome back.
Before I end, I just want to say that we do have a gig. We've been, Love Music Networks has been a bit quiet for the last couple of years, but we have a gig on the 29th of October featuring Spektrum. And we've got some of the acts include Tara Danger, Saskilla, and some more to be confirmed. Do pick one of these up. They should be on your seat, so pick one up anyway. If you want to sign our mailing list, we can keep in touch. But yeah, let's start the movement again and get things going.